This week we're taking a 3D print and making silicone molds using Lego. Welcome back to the Fee Studio. As I pack up some artwork, let me share a recap of what's gone on this month. We got to take a look at a very special collaboration project between me and a good friend, Arctic Fox. I shared some paintwork on a few Mandos while watching Clone Troopers. I even painted a one-of-a-kind variant. We took a few trips, and I've had a handful of video calls. Now as the month of August is coming to an end, I'm really excited to start some fall projects. But let me just take a moment to appreciate this one. We made it. Thank you. Now we can get back to the studio. So let's get started. In my last video, I left off sanding one of my 3D sculptures, Ragnar. In the beginning stages, I used a few materials like sanding sponges and sandpaper. The goal was to just get all the print lines smooth, and I finished it off by laying a thin coat of primer. Now that the primer is dry, I can go in and start cleaning up all the little imperfections. So that's where I'll begin, as I share how I take a 3D print and make silicone molds, giving us an exact copy, but in a stronger material. We want to focus on any of the air pockets, build lines, areas where the support's connected to the model, and some of the other areas that were questionable on the print, especially on the back of the head and one of the legs. I like to give all the pieces a nice once over, and as I do this, I'll make a mental note of what needs to happen going forward with each piece. There's a reason why sanding is probably the least favorite thing for a lot of people. It's because you literally can spend days, if not weeks, depending on the piece, on this process. If you're making molds using your 3D prints, it is very important that you get your initial base print to look like the way that you want all your pieces to look. This is going to save you tons of time sanding the actual resin copies. And once I have a good idea of what needs to happen on each piece, I can move on to glazing. I'm using this liquid gold that I was recommended by a good friend of mine. It's similar to Bondo, and it has this self-leveling property. Now the way it works is you just pour a bit of putty down and about 2% of the actual hardener. Once you mix those together, you have just a few minutes before it starts hardening. This is perfect for all those tiny holes, and it only takes about 20 minutes to dry. And then I can start sanding those areas. Now on the back of the helmet, I'm going to try to build up this edge that was kind of flattened out by the printer. And once that dries, I can give it a final sand. Sometimes this part can be very repetitive. Unfortunately, I am not finished sanding Ragnar. I was hoping to get it done yesterday, but I was here till about midnight, and the only thing that kept me longer was the time that the filler needed to dry before I could spray it in some more primer. So that puts me about a day behind, but I have an idea that might keep me on track. So let's get the day started. On the final stages of sanding, it's really important that I take my time to get this sculpture to look really good. I know this might seem like a lot of work, but when you do it enough, it gets easier. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks, so I'll move on to spraying the parts with primer, making sure that I give it a thicker coat and allow it time to dry. I'm a bit sweaty. Moving on, I'm just going to be focusing on some editing today, and tomorrow morning we're going to be taking a trip. Good morning. Today we need to head out to Reynolds Advanced Materials to pick up some more resin, as well as a silicone that'll cure faster than what I typically use. So let's get on the road. We've made it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to film inside and show all the really cool sculptures and props they have. Maybe next time. I totally spaced. There are a few areas on the head and body that I still need to plug, and since both these parts are hollow, I'll need to fill them with resin so that when they're under pressure, they don't crack. This is a bit of a bummer because I was ready to make some molds, and the resin I'm using cures in about 30 minutes, but I'll need to pour a little at a time. If I rush it and make a mess, I can create more work. I'll try to keep things clean by using this tiny measuring cup and this piping tip I found as a funnel. And after a few hours of pouring, everything's filled. It's not perfect, but all the parts fit, and these areas are going to be hidden. I picked up some more resin and a brand new silicone. I'll talk more about these products as soon as I use them, but first I need to build some mold boxes using Lego. To make a two-piece mold, the idea is to use these Lego bricks and build a box around each piece, and we'll submerge everything in this monster clay. Starting with the legs, I'm going to have these sitting upright because I'll be pouring resin from above. Now the arms will be set in a little different. I think I'm going to lay them down, and I'll pour from underneath. Give me just a minute and you'll see what I mean. By creating these boxes, it really helps me understand how I'm going to make each mold. For this little piece of armor off his helmet, I'm going to create a single mold. On the body, there's this area where silicone is going to have to go inside in order to capture the detail, so most likely I'll pour from above. And on the bottom of the head, there's all this detail, so I think it's best to lay it flat, and I'll also pour from above. Now taking this monster clay, I'm going to heat everything up and break it apart so I can start laying it in each box. Using just a little bit of heat, the monster clay will get really soft and I'll be able to spread it. What's really nice about the monster clay is that I can reuse it whenever I need to. Okay, it's now Thursday. No, it's Friday. I took the day off because I was celebrating my daughter's 10th birthday. It's crazy to think that I've been a parent for 10 years. So we're going to pick up where I left off on Wednesday. We're going to start making the molds, and typically I end my videos on a Friday, so hopefully I get everything done. We're going to try. Now that I have a general understanding for the mold layouts, I can finalize them. And I start by making sure every edge is filled with the clay. And I have a few sculpting tools that I like to use to help me. They're a little beaten up, but these are my go-to tools. I'll use them to cut along edges and around my sculpture. After heating up the clay, all I need to do is press down to set it, making sure that it sits nice and tight. And I'll cut around the rest of the edges. This will make sure I have a tight seam line. And next, I'll use my favorite tools, my brushes. The bottom of them are great for keying in these little registration marks, so that the molds sit together tightly. I'll work from the largest brush to the smaller brush, getting closer to my model. And I like to use these modeling ball tools to get even closer. While I was creating the layout, there was this one area that was a bit concerning, and that's where these extra pieces are going to fit on his helmet. If I pour the silicone, I'm afraid that the helmet will get stuck. So I'm going to add a bit more clay in this area, slightly changing the design of the mold. I've been building molds for about 8 years now, so if you're trying to make them, don't rush this process. Focus on the design of your object and understanding how the resin will flow when you do build the box. Now I'm going to add the spouts. These are the areas that I'll pour my resin in. I'll place one in the center and 2 on either end that'll allow air to escape. I like to use wooden dowels because they come in different diameters and they're easy to cut. I'll cut them long enough so that they're sticking above the Lego bricks and just glue them on. Now I'll repeat this process for all the other molds. Though the layout will be slightly different, the concept is the same. And before pouring any silicone, I want to spray this ease release spray that I got. This will seal everything and make sure that the silicone doesn't stick to my parts. And everything's looking really good. Typically I don't wait long before I start pouring silicone, but I've been working on these molds for about 7 hours now. And rather than rush the project and start pouring resin to get it done tonight, I think I'm gonna call it, grab some food, finish some editing, and I'll be back in 2 days to wrap it up. I think we made some really good progress on Friday, and it was really nice to get some time off. But moving forward, today I have tons of work. I want to pour both sides of the silicone molds, and I even want to test one resin, so I can share an example of how it came out. And by the end of the day, I'm hoping to have all the editing done and we can post this video over on Patreon. So, let's get on it. The silicone I'm using is called Moldstar 20T. It works a lot faster than the Moldstar 30 I use. It has a pot life or working time of 6 minutes and a curing time of only 30 minutes, which is quick, but that also means I need to work a lot faster. Before using it, I make sure to stir each part really good, because if I don't, this could mess with the way that it hardens. Oh yeah, be sure to wear your protective gear and have a well ventilated area. So don't do this in the house. Since the mix ratio is 1:1, I'll pour equal parts A and B together and make sure to stir those really good. And I'll pour these 3 molds that are going to have spouts on the opposite end. And to make sure everything's airtight, I'm putting everything in a pressure pot, compressing them for as long as the 30-minute cure time. Now I'll move on to the other molds. Now I did have one issue. I was a little low on the mixture of silicone that I poured, and I didn't have enough for the helmet, so I'll need to remove that silicone and start over. This kind of stinks because it adds more time,